Hi, this is Dr. Dan Ritchie, one of your co-hosts of the Functional Health Summit, and we had several speakers that unfortunately we just couldn't get in due to scheduling, and frankly we just ran out of time as the dates came up. And so fortunately I've got Tyler on the line with me today via Skype, and really wanted to have Tyler Bramlett as one of our speakers, but we just didn't get him scheduled quickly enough. So today he's doing a free interview for us, and we're going to share this with you for several days, so make sure you watch this. Tyler has been in the fitness industry for several years. He's a certified kettlebell functional movement specialist. He's a USAW weightlifting coach, which means he really knows how to teach people how to lift and how to move things. But he's also had a lot of personal experience with some injuries and, maybe not training exactly the way everyone wants to. So he's learned from some of his own mistakes. So welcome, Tyler. Thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the call, Dan. I'm really excited.
Yeah, great. Well, tell us just a little bit, Tyler. I know you have, I've seen you really in the last 2 years just kind of explode in the fitness industry. You've gone from sort of a personal trainer doing kettlebells and, leading boot camps and that sort of thing to now having over 30,000 clients online and over 500 amazing body transformations. I mean, you're really obviously helping a lot more people by not just training in a gym anymore. So kind of tell us a little bit about that in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I started out kind of in the fitness industry a little bit as a late bloomer, Dan. I was people, how you see a lot of personal trainers that they're the guys who were athletes in high school and they were all fit and so on and so forth. Well, I always tell people I grew up in a house where we thought diet soda was a health food. Right? It was like, if as long as you got diet soda and fat-free on the label, you're good to go. So I was really unhealthy as a kid. I was rather overweight. I even remember at like 15, 16 years old having like night sweats, heart palpitations, like serious health issues starting to come up because my nutrition was so poor. I wasn't exercising at all. And then it was actually a Tony Robbins book that I read early on that made me realize I have the ability to choose what I want to become in my life. Right? And so that was a pretty changing moment. And so what did I say? I said, you know what? I'm going to start eating cleaner. I'm going to work out, and I'm going to become a rock star. Right? And that's not a joke. I played drums in a rock band for several years where my goal was to become a rock star, but I didn't like the lifestyle. Ultimately, it was just too much travel. There wasn't a lot of opportunity to eat right and stuff, and I was really trying to clean up my diet and kind of be better that way. So I ultimately dropped the rock and roll goal and became a starving personal trainer for quite some time as well. So, starving personal trainer is when somebody does personal training, but that's not their full-time job. They can barely make ends meet. So I was doing construction work on the side. And then the best thing in the world ever happened to me. I lost my construction job during that bubble burst. And I said, you know what? This is going to give me the time to go full-time. So I started a boot camp business. Worked my butt off, partnered with the local gym chain, worked my butt off. I remember at the end of the first month after launching everything, getting everybody out there, I looked at how much money I'd made and it was like $400 for 200 hours of work, right? I was like, I just made $2 an hour, right? But the good news is I was able to leverage that, and eventually we had boot camps in 4 locations with about 300 members, and we were doing a lot of body transformations, helping a lot of people out. And that was awesome, and it was totally great. But I really had this hankering for several years to get into the online fitness space because I see so many people helping significantly more people. And, it's great that I could have 300 people, working under my tutelage and stuff like that. But now I have 30,000, and I've only been at this for a couple of years, so I can only imagine a couple of years from now we're going to have hundreds of thousands of people listening to my methods. And that's what I guess I'm somebody who really wants to spread my message, which is progressive movement, progressive nutrition, progressive lifestyle strategies, so people can go from really basic things and really transform their bodies and lives over the long haul. And so eventually sold the boot camps, and now I'm 100% online, focusing on helping people all around the world through my methods.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love that. We met several years ago at a fitness meeting, and I remember then you were kind of coined the Garage Warrior, and I think you have a Warrior Abs program that you used to do. So cool stuff. And I know one thing that we share in common is really the approach to functional movement, because I think so many people really don't think about functional movement patterns. Sure. And they're training the same plane of motion over and over and over and over and over, and they wonder why eventually their knee or their shoulder hurts. And so tell us just a little bit about some of the injuries you've had. I know we've talked, we both share some common knee injuries. Tell us about some of the injuries that you have dealt with, and then kind of your functional approach to how you train now?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Well, luckily most of my injuries, at least my really bad injuries, came not from doing things in the gym, but came from other circumstances. The first one happened when I was 17 years old. I was riding a bike home from work, and a car hit me from the left side, and it broke the bottom of my femur and tore up the cartilage and everything, and I wasn't able to walk for I think it was about 8 or 12 weeks before I could get back up and weight bear again on that surface. And it was really challenging. I mean, at that point, I was kind of doing more power bodybuilding stuff, and I remember being like, I'm going to leg press 900 pounds, and I was closing into my goal. I was at 850 pounds, and I knew that within a couple weeks I was going to go back in there, I was going to be able to leg press that 900 pounds for reps, right? And I got hit by the car, and I was like, this is terrible. And after about four to 6 months, I can't remember exactly, I started going back to the gym. I remember getting down on the leg extension machine and just going for it. And on the way down that eccentric, my knee was like, ah! It felt like my knee was shearing, because you can't just go back to these isolated open chain movements like that post-injury. Your muscles don't work the same way anymore. And so I had to learn a lot about knee function, about reactivating muscles, about properly stabilizing through the hip, about mobility and flexibility in the lower body, and that translated, of course, into the upper body. But so it's one of those things that injury happened, and I felt like it happened for a reason that I could be more empathetic towards people that come to me with injuries. Because guess what? If you have knee pain, squatting through a full range of motion isn't just the magic fix. Like, you have to understand that, like, if your muscles aren't working properly, if your hips aren't hinging properly, if your weight isn't distributed perfectly across your foot, if you don't have a strong foot, there's so many different things that you have to learn in order to reactivate that leg to make sure that the knee doesn't hurt anymore. The good news is, after that injury, I was able to do as many as 30 one-legged squats on that injured knee after the doctor told me I should never squat again. So functional movement does work. You just have to do it very slowly, because it took me about 2 years to get to that point of really following a logical progression and training over time. After that, I did suffer, about 3 years ago, I suffered a knee injury. This was a little bit more of a my fault situation. I was doing adult gymnastics. I was like, I'm going to branch out and try some different kinds of movements. So I was doing adult gymnastics, and I was pretty good at the handstand stuff and some of the basic floor stuff. But they started trying to get me to do more complex floor stuff. And one thing that you'll realize if you've ever done any gymnastics as a little bit older of a person, it doesn't have to be that old. Over 16 is plenty. You're like, oh, dang, this is pretty rough on the body, right? And so I was doing some twisting moves, and I was coming down. I kept thinking to myself, this isn't right. You shouldn't do this. Like, my intuition was telling me that. And of course, what did I say? I said, you know what? Forget you, intuition. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to punch way harder. And I came down, and I tore my ACL, MCL, LCL, quad, and meniscus all in one shot. It was one of those situations where the knee just goes sideways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm still wrestling with that injury, to be totally honest, but it's coming back around. I got my back squat up. It's back up to 225 for 10. My one-legged squat is almost back, but it's been 2.5 years, of really trying to retrain this stuff. And along the process of me injuring that knee, I got to meet a lot of cool people along the way. I got to learn a lot about core development, because one of the things that happens is when we get injured in any spot of our body, it typically affects our core function. Because, if you have a big brace on your leg, you're going to hip hike to walk and do that like funky hip hike walk. And then the next thing you know, your right side's going to be firing really well. Your left side's going to be turned off. And now your back starts hurting. Now your shoulder starts rounding forward. You get frozen shoulder. All these little tiny aches and pains started happening to me because of my knee injuries. And I had to learn how to fix each one along the way. And all of it kind of came back to basic core movements, functioning core patterns, and also doing a lot more balance and unilateral training rather than just stacking the weights on a bar and going for heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, heavy bench presses and stuff. Because right now, I still tell you, to this day, if you have injuries, I'm totally with you. My right side of my body does not function as well as my left side of my body. And it's opposite for my lower body. It's, I have what's called upper cross syndrome, where there's a great connection across one direction and the other connection across the other direction doesn't work quite as well. So you have to constantly work and use the right types of exercises to fix it, because what I learned was you can't just do, bicycles and be like, well, I'm doing a rotational movement pattern now, it's going to fix my core. Nope, it isn't going to happen. You've got to do more sophisticated stuff in order to get there. And if you do, then you can actually correct your body along the way. So hopefully that answers your question and some of my thoughts on training.
No, that's great. And I think honestly, you kind of experienced what a lot of my clients over 50 come in experiencing,
Right.
sort of like my right knee and my right hip have been hurting for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so, that's now causing dysfunction in your lower back on your left side, and maybe your shoulders and all kinds of things just don't feel good because you've been dealing with this dysfunction for so long. And so you went through that with, obviously an injury at a young age. So So a warning for everybody out there thinking about taking up gymnastics at a later age, I guess. So, well, let's talk a little bit about your 27 Habits program, because I know we wanted to talk about that in the Health Summit, and it dovetails really well with John Rowley's talk, which was really, really simple in that, he basically said, look, Dan, if people will just walk away from the Health Summit and just take 6 habits, 6 tips away from these 40 speakers, how much healthier will they be 6 weeks from now? And so to kind of follow up, I say to everyone that went through the Functional Health Summit, if you're working on 2 or 3 things, if you can just take on 6, maybe 10 new health habits, how dramatically different your health can be. And so your approach, with the 27 habits is kind of a simple approach of, hey, if we just do the things most of us know we should be doing, and start doing those with consistency, we feel better, we have more energy, just our mood improves. I mean, our weight improves, just so many things. So if you could kind of take a step by step through kind of how your transformation program works, because I mean, it's impressive now that you're helping 30,000 people. Right. So,
well, I'm glad John said 6 habits, because I'll share with you in a second my own 6 habits that I do try to get people focusing on first. But I'll give you a little backstory. So, I had my boot camps. We were doing lots of body transformation challenges. And as you know, Dan, I'm like a super analytical guy. I'm always trying to figure out how to make the pieces of the puzzle work better. And so the first transformation challenge worked, but I was like, where could we fix it? And then we did another one. I think to date, I've run about 8 or 9 transformation challenges, including several online now. And every time they improve and they get better. And ultimately, I realized it wasn't about the advanced stuff. The advanced stuff was making people go neurotic and then quit, right? They were like, oh, I have to do this, I have to count this, I have to do that. They were getting crazy. And it was when I dumbed it down and I made it really simple that everyone started to see some changes. And then the people wanted to go slightly deeper down the rabbit hole saw more significant changes, right? And the other thing to think about too is I used to give people this sheet, right? I remember when they'd sign up, I'd be like, slide them this book, 60 pages, go home and read it and do everything in this book and it'll work. And that was true, but how many people did it? Maybe 1 out of 50 people actually did what I said. And I realized, that made me, that put me as a poor trainer, because I was expecting something that they weren't doing. And to me, a good coach or a good trainer takes somebody under their wing and they figure out how to get them to make permanent lifestyle changes that will translate them into getting the best results possible. And so I started actually looking into psychology and what habits, why habits form, how they form, and so on and so forth. And I found a Dr. Donald Hebb in the past, and he coined the term nerves that fire together, wire together. I love that term so much. And this is the same reason why if you have an injury that you're nursing it for a while, it's harder to fix than if you have an injury and then you go get it fixed right away, is because the more you do a dysfunctional movement pattern, the easier it is for your body to repeat that dysfunctional movement pattern, and the harder it gets for your body to fix that dysfunctional movement pattern. The best exhibit I can give you of that example is I trained a marathon runner. It took me 9 months to get her knees to go the same direction as her toes, because she overfired the inside of her thighs as she ran on every single rep, and it caused a little valgus collapse with every single step. And we had to do drill after drill after drill after drill. Well, guess what? The reason why we had to do that is because she's done hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of steps wrong. So we had to do tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of steps as correctly as possible to get that to fix. Okay, that's the concept of nerves that fire together to wire together. It's not just in your body, though. It's in your lifestyle habits. So when you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, shit, cereal's a lot easier than cooking some pastured eggs, right? Well, that's a habit, and that becomes easier. The more you do that, the easier it becomes. That's why people often find themselves in this trap of obesity or health, like disease, is because they've done something wrong so many times that is so much easier for them to do than something right. And so what I found, Dan, was instead of being like, do this, do that, do this, that, I started giving them simple things, right? And literally, my personal clients, I would slide one card across the table and I'd say, you're going to do this for a week. If you can do this for a week, then I'll give you the next card. And literally, it starts with this: drink more water, right? I want you to drink 64 ounces of water per day or more. If they master that, they come back, and guess what the next step is? I slide it across the table. I say, I want you to eat enough protein. Okay, that means usually for women, I tell them 100 to 150 grams. For men, it's usually about 150 to 200. It's not a crazy amount, but it's enough to sustain you and make you lean and actually reduce your hunger cravings, right? So that's 2 things I tell them to do. What's the next thing, right? Okay, all right, how about get 7.5 hours of quality sleep per night, right? Wow, that's not
who
that
has
hard.
time for that?
Yeah, who has time? People say that, but on the reality is, if you're at 4 hours, get 5 or 6. You know, if you're at 6, go for 7.5. I pick 7.5 because I believe that's about the minimum amount you need to really optimally function. And if you can get more than that, that's even better, right? So get more sleep. Then from there we say, okay, everybody knows this, but nobody's doing it. How about you try eating 10 servings of vegetables a day, right? That's it. You don't have to eat the Mediterranean diet or the paleo diet or the low carb diet or the slow carb diet or anything like that. What if you just drank more water, ate enough protein, and had enough servings of vegetables per day? Those are my 3 basic diet tips. If you aren't doing that, nothing will help you, right? Like, you cannot do all this other stuff. It doesn't matter, right? Because you don't have the basics mastered. And guess what? Even if you fend off of and you go on some more strict diet and you start getting results with it, what happens is people go back to their old ways. I want their old ways to be eat 10 servings of vegetables, eat enough protein, drink enough water, not to be eating cereal, eating garbage foods all the time, not eating enough protein, dehydrated, and not eating any vegetables, right? So you have to build this foundation in order to make long-term progress, not just short-term progress. So I've shared 4 of my favorite habits with you. The last 2 are exercise-based, and you guys are going to like them because they're not that challenging, okay? Habit number 5 that I really like people to focus on: walk every day. Right? Go for a walk, right? It's the best fat burning exercise in the world. And guess what? Walking, we talked about your core dysfunctioning contralaterally. Walking helps reconnect your core contralaterally, especially if you're mindful as you walk and you don't just walk with the old limp that you used to have, right? But practicing your walk, taking deep breathing during your walk, getting sunshine during your walk, listening to your favorite podcast during your walk. There's so much more to it than that. You can find so many things that a walk can benefit. So I'm a huge fan of, like, just set a timer for 20 minutes, right? Walk 10 minutes out from your house, walk 10 minutes back from your house. If you can't walk because it's too hot, like, walk around the couch, walk around your house. That's fine too. My wife had a grandfather who lived to 96 years old. He used to run laps around his house because they lived in Arizona. So it was really hot. So he'd run laps around his house because he wouldn't go outside and do it. So, hey, you can get the job done, I promise you. All right. And the last tip, the 6th thing that I try to get people to focus on, is to follow an intelligently designed strength and conditioning program 3 days per week. Not 5, not 7, not 2 hours in the gym each day. You just need 30, 45, maybe an hour max, 3 days a week. And make sure it's smart, though. That's the problem, is, like, I'm a huge fan of different types of training, and I like cross-training implements, but the idea is, if you don't progress, if you don't make a progression, if you don't get slightly stronger, slightly better at balance, improve your range of motion, any of those components, right, the amount of reps you can do, the time you can hold the exercises for, then you're not going to make progress. That's why people go from exercise or workout to exercise to exercise. They never get any results because they never made actual progress, right? If you're not able to go from a kneeling push-up to a regular push-up, you know, or a squat to a lunge, then guess what? You're never going to make progress. So I'm really just a huge fan of hammering those 6 habits and then trying to get people, hey, if you can focus on these 6 things, you know, try using an intelligently aligned strength and conditioning program and do all these other 6 things, like, you're going to get great results. It's that simple. But one more quick thing before I cut this rant off, Dan, is that I also try to give people one thing at a time, because we look at habits, and I gave you 6. That's great. And if you go out and try to focus on 6 of them, maybe you will succeed, but I seriously doubt it. So today, just go drink more water. You know what I mean? And then come back, listen to this again, pick the next one you feel like you're doing the worst, and focus on that one for a week or 2. You know? It's really that simple.
Yeah, that was really the great thing that John Rowley said was, look, there's 40 speakers at your summit. People can't take on 40 different things, right? And he said, if people just take on 6 things and try to tackle them one every week, 6 weeks from now, they're going to be way healthier. You know, so like the 6 things you laid out, I mean, trying to, you know, it's your diet plan's not that complex, but trying to do all 3 of those, you know, tomorrow, whoa, that might overwhelm me. 10, I mean, especially if I'm eating 2 vegetables a day, maybe 3, and now you want me to go to 10? You know, like, I probably need to start by just trying to get to 5.
Right,
you know,
Yeah, you gradually take that goal and chunk it down even more. Make it smaller. The thing
gradually is, get to 10, you know, before my family just has a revolt and says, what is all this green stuff we're eating, you know? So, you really have to, I think sometimes this is why so many people fail on diet and exercise programs, is because it's like this whole massive change. And after you do that for a couple weeks, you're like, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. And you just go right back to where you were, instead of small habits that transform us. So that's great stuff. So recently you shared kind of an experience from your life that, you know, I'd like to have everybody kind of hear. It definitely kind of moved me. you were launching a new abs program from 0 to 6-pack abs, kind of implying no abs to 6-pack abs.
Right.
Kind of an interesting concept there. But you shared kind of your story of, I think, the birth of your first child, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank
but
you. Appreciate it.
If you could share that to me, that was pretty inspirational.
Yeah. Well, I had a product that you mentioned earlier on. So when I first started my online stuff, it was all garage warrior abs, warrior lower body. It was really kind of hardcore stuff. It was laid out in logical progressions, but ultimately I realized that I was kind of shooting myself in the foot as well, because I have a passion for helping normal people, like people, especially people who have injuries, people who are a little bit older and they're not seeing any results from their workout programs. Like I have a passion for helping those people because I feel like I'm uniquely gifted at doing that sort of thing. The hardcore stuff, I love training for skills and strength and stuff like that, but there's other people out there that do it better than I do. And so I'm like, you know what? I need to appeal to what my heart's telling me to appeal to, and that's to the masses who have, they're frustrated with their exercise programs, they're not getting the results they want, they have injuries that they can't fix or heal up, and I wanted to appeal to those people. And so I basically took all my old programs, I started scratching my head about how I could make things more simple. So in 2013, I released CT50, which is our fat loss cross-training program that's laid out in logical progressions. Then I released 27 Habits, which we just talked about. And then it was coming into 2014, I was like, I need to recreate this ab product because of this experience that I had. And I'll share the experience with you. I had this ab product that was based on progressive movement around gymnastics and so on and so forth, but a lot of people weren't able to bridge the gap from one exercise to the next. An example would be if you're doing hanging knee raises, where you're hanging from a bar and you're lifting your knees, and then the next step might be hanging leg raises, where your toes are going all the way to the bar. Well, there's a pretty big jump there. And what we found is people just simply didn't have the skill of abdominal activation to get there. And I found this in a roundabout way. So I'll share the story with you, all right? So my wife and I are really holistic, and we wanted to have a natural home birth. So we did this whole home birth route, and we were really excited about the whole thing. And long story short, pretty much everything went wrong, right? Our home birth quickly turned into a hospital thing. And not quickly, I should say. It took about 48 hours before she was finally born. So it was a long process as well. But so we went to the hospital. My wife's pushing for like hours and not making any progress. And then we end up taking her in for a cesarean section. And this was the worst part. And I have to choke up on this one a little bit because it was pretty intense. I was suiting up. I didn't write this in the story. I was suiting up, and I put this scrub on, and I went up to the thing to go into the room where we were going to have the cesarean section, and a nurse comes out and stops me and says, "Oh, you can't be in there." And I was like, "What?" And my wife's a non-responder to narcotics, so she could feel them touching her when they gave her an epidural in her spine, so they had to knock her fully out, and they wouldn't allow me into the OR with her fully under anesthesia. I think partly it's because once a woman goes under general anesthesia, the baby automatically is under general anesthesia, so your baby's born lifeless. So it's kind of a frightening experience for a father to be the only live one in the room. So I understand that, but on the same note, that was probably the biggest emotional struggle of my life, is waiting in a hallway after not sleeping for 3 days and like not knowing what's happening and just freaking the hell out. So anyways, that was the emotional side of the story. My baby was born. She was beautiful. She ended up being very healthy and stuff. But my wife had a cesarean section, and when she got back to starting to do stuff, she had all kinds of issues. This kind of ties back into the core stuff we were talking about. And ladies, if you're listening to this call and you've had a cesarean section and nobody's ever helped you with core function, then I really highly recommend you seek a qualified therapist or a really qualified trainer to help you with this stuff, because you can have diastasis recti, where your abs are separated, they stay like that forever. You can have what people call just a pouch belly, where your stomach doesn't know how to suck in and fire properly because all the muscles inside aren't working properly. And my wife was exhibiting signs of that. So I was lucky enough to be like, hey, we're going to go to this physical therapy group, the same people that rehab my knees that I really trusted. And she started working with people there, and I met the owner of the place. His name's Dr. James Vager. And James studies what's called DNS, or dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, which is this really kind of newish sort of science, but it's based on infant motor progressions, right? And so when we look at a baby, what do? They're on their back, and the first thing they learn how to do is roll over. Then once they learn how to roll over, then they learn how to press up. Then they learn how to crawl. So they're activating those contralateral movement patterns. Then they learn how to press up and to stand. And so they dissected this, and they take people, even like professional athletes. That's one of the funniest things, Dan, that happened to me after launching 0-6-pack abs. People going, this is too easy. I'm like, well, then you don't get it. Like, I don't need you here because you're not really getting it. Because honestly, Olympic Greco-Roman wrestlers are doing these exercises, and I'm pretty sure they could mess you up on anything, right? So anyways, he teaches this kind of patterns, and I saw it, and he worked with her, I went and did some of these pattern stuff myself, and I was like, this needs to be out there for the world. And so that's when we created 0 to 6 pack abs. I asked James if he'd partner with me on a project, and so I canned my Warrior Abs thing. I said, let's create something with his core activation sequences where you teach people how to basically properly stabilize the trunk, and then you learn how to move one limb at a time, then 2 limbs at a time, contralaterally, ipsilaterally, and then people, like, literally, once we launched this product, like 3 days later, I'm getting emails, my back pain's gone. And I'm like, whoa, this is pretty intense. And we got these great stuff because people literally, they'll walk around just not firing their core muscles properly. They go to bend over and they put all the pressure on their spine, none of the brunt on the core where it's supposed to be. And so it was really powerful. We launched the product and we've had nothing but amazing results from people with it. And then, I teach the second phase of the program, which we call phase 2, fancy name. But I use what's called micro-progression technology. So I basically took everything and I brought it down to a progression. And a simple example would be like, if you were doing a lying leg raise with your hands under your butt, before moving on to something like an activated lying leg raise where you would hold like a kettlebell over your head, I would have you go palms next to your hips, then hands to your sides, then arms overhead, and then you can hold the kettlebell. So it's like these really tiny steps between exercises that help people go from 0 to 6-pack abs. So that was kind of the process of creating that product. But I'm just so happy with it. I think that everybody needs to start with those core activation sequences, those phase 1 techniques that James teaches. And like literally, that's what I'm pointing everybody to when they have injuries. Like, hey, this is kind of a foundation, learning how to stabilize your core and move unilaterally, contralaterally, ipsilaterally. And once you can do that, you'll be surprised. Like all of a sudden things kind of start to sit into its proper place. It's so powerful how basic stuff can really help pretty much anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say, when I read your story about, I think you included it in there that, at the last minute you were basically told, I'm not going to be allowed in for the birth of my child. I just remember sitting there like, I get choked up just thinking about it since I obviously was at the birth of my 4 children. And so for you to miss that obviously had to be just crushing, But then for you to share that, and then obviously you've used what your wife went through to, develop a program to help thousands of people is really cool, So, a lot of times our suffering can be used to really help others, So it was cool to see you share that. And so I was glad you were able to share that with people today. So, as we wrap up here, just give us kind of your 2 to 3 minute takeaway on, kind of lifestyle transformation. And, because I know a lot of our listeners are struggling with health issues and chronic pain and just a variety of things. And, I get messages from people that just from around the world that, watched our health summit and have said, hey, this is helping me. So what do you want to share with them in just the last couple of minutes here?
Yeah. Well, first I'd like to say one more thing about what you were just saying about the birth story. And I have a philosophy that might tie into what I'm going to say next, which is everything in your life happens for a good reason. It's your responsibility to find that reason. And I've shared that with my followers several times, and I get hate mail back from that. Like, what if this terrible thing happened? I'm like, that's not the point. The point is when something bad happens to you, you can use it to find out what good came from it, or you can take it and you could be like, poor me, and you could crumple up, or you can hate the world or hate other people, but that's not how I want to live my life, right? If I want to die and I want to look at my life and I want to say, okay, every bad thing that happened to me was ultimately turned around for a good reason to help more people. And my philosophy is I want to help more people look, feel, and perform their best, right? And so when something like that happened, you're right. I took that and I spun it around into something that actually ended up helping a lot of people, and I'm really proud of that. It still is painful. It's not like it's an unpainful experience, but at least I used it for a good reason rather than being like, screw doctors and screw this and screw that. Like I could have easily gone down the hate route. And so wherever you're at in your life right now, it doesn't matter if you're 20 or you're 90, right? I think that there's a lot of bad things that happen to us that we harbor and we try to make them into excuses as to why we can't do anything forward. So I want to share two nuggets of wisdom from you. First is everybody needs to take personal responsibility for themselves, right? You need to understand that the results where you're at right now has to have some degree of you taking personal responsibility. The only way you'll actually change your life you'll transform your body, you'll get rid of your injuries, maybe you'll transform your financial situation, is if you look at your life and you say, I'm just, even if it's not true in my head right now, I'm going to pretend that I am responsible for everything in my life. And then I'm going to start figuring out what I can do to make that all better. Because if you take personal responsibility, you can do anything you want, you can be anything you want, you can have anything you want. And so that was a big transformation in my life, was realizing that like I don't have to depend on this guy or that guy. If this went wrong, this was my fault. And I constantly ask myself, when things aren't going wrong in my life, I say, what is it in me that caused this to happen in my life, right? I try to make it all about my perception and my personal responsibility of the situation. So take personal responsibility for yourself. That will allow you to take the steps forward to improve yourself. Next is the most important thing, and that is forget about intensity, forget about fancy programs, forget about diets, forget about anything you've ever heard, because nothing will work without consistency, okay? And I used to be a huge fan of intensity, and then I had this epiphany one day that the people I saw getting the best results were just simply consistent, right? They worked out 3 days a week. They walked every day. They ate their vegetables. They drank their water. They ate their protein. They got good night's sleep. They were consistent with the basics. And then if they want to take it to the next level, they've earned the right to take it to the next level, to move forward, to progress more, because they've mastered the basics. But if you go from standard American diet, hating people, blaming people and everything like that, to I'm going to go on this crazy diet, I'm going to work out 7 days a week, well, guess what? You're going to end up right back where you started, because almost nobody sticks to what they're doing right there. So I'm just such a bigger fan of like forgiving yourself, realizing that you don't have to jump forward with this stuff, taking just these tiny baby steps, focusing on those baby steps, moving forward, taking responsibility if you mess up, taking responsibility if you succeed, and being consistent with it. So be consistent. That's my final message for everybody.
Yeah. So simple, but so many people want the magic pill or the magic program when consistency really is what it's all about for years and years and years. So, well, thanks so much, Tyler, for doing this. Obviously, all our Functional Health Summit people will get to see this. And right below the video, we're going to put a picture and a link to Tyler's 27 transformation habits, because I really think that really is a great follow-up to what John Rowley shared, and really the simplistic of, let's just master the simple things a week at a time. So if 27 weeks from now people have mastered 27 new habits, they're going to be just tremendously feel better. They're going to be healthier. There's just going to be so many results. So Tyler, thanks so much for being on here. I know all our Functional Health Summit people will really appreciate your story and all the lives you're impacting.
Awesome. Thanks, Stan. I really appreciate it. And everybody, thank you for listening.
All right.